If I do that, going live. Here we
Yes.
are. Hang on. Okay, it says we're.
There we go.
Hey.
Perfect.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's 9 out
Only
of 10
a couple minutes late.
testers. The first of 2022. Yeah, late as usual, but all right, we'll work on that. We'll get better every time. So today we're going to be talking about what we call ourselves and why. I have a feeling this is going to get heated. This is going to get ranty. This is going to get real complainy, and hopefully we'll end on a very nice note. But let's get started. Why did we choose this topic? I think Veerle, you had a story for us.
Yeah, although to be honest, this is a topic that I'm very emotionally invested in because you know what I'm like. I'm into my linguistics. But yeah, a few weeks ago, I was in the Agile Testing Days book club, and I'm not going to be naming any names, but there was one person in there who introduced themselves as a QA because obviously I don't like to use the word tester. And I was like, that's weird because I love the word tester and I hate the word QA. So I thought, you know what, clearly this is still relevant. This is still a touchy topic. Let's talk about it.
Yep. So before we get started on that, I think this rung a bell for all of us, which is why we decided to have it today. So just quickly introduce yourself and tell us what's your current job title as well. Veerle, you start us off.
Yeah, I'll start because I'm so passionate about this topic. My name is Veerle. I work for Riskate, and my official job title is software tester.
Nice. How about you, Chris?
My name is Chris, and I'm currently a product quality strategy manager at Provar.
Nice. Shey, how about you?
So I'm Shey, and I am senior quality engineer at Prima Assicurazioni. I hope I've pronounced that right, or Prima Insurance.
Thanks. Hanna?
Yes, my name is Hanna and I work at Devoteam Creative Tech, and my job title is Quality Catalyst.
Oh, you've got the best one.
Okay, we win. We can go now.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I'm gonna admit I do really like that one actually.
So my name is Sanne. My title is at the moment DevOps engineer. So just team member would be, I think, the equivalent. And at Capgemini, though, I am what is called a managing consultant. There's a big stuff going on about titles there. So titles and status. We'll get into that in a bit. All right. So QA or tester, why do you hate it? Why do you love it? Let's get started.
I'll go first. I love the word tester because I feel that it is an honest title for an honest profession. I don't like QA for all of the normal objections that everybody who hates QA has against it. So it's kind of like an appropriation of quality, which I think is not correct. Like everybody owns quality, of course. We don't actually do any kind of assuring. What we do is, in my opinion, testers investigate and report on what they have found in their investigations. And I don't feel that assurance is really a part of that. And apart from that, I always feel like if you try and give it like a fancier job title, it's because you fundamentally lack respect for the profession. Like if you start calling cleaners in the Netherlands, we do this quite a bit. Cleaners are usually called something like facilities staff or something like that. And I'm like, it's because people fundamentally lack respect for the profession that is a cleaner. People don't recognize its importance. And so they start making up like different titles for it. And I'm like, no, a cleaner is a very important role and we should be acknowledging it as such. And I think the same for testers. Let us be testers.
This is the thing you were ranting about on your first presentation, I think ever on stage, where you mentioned like, well, bakers don't call themselves dough engineers. That's true. Stuck in my brain as an example.
I mentioned the dough engineer quite a lot because I think it really drives the point home very, very clearly. Like people say like, well, testers do more than just testing. And I'm like, well, yes, obviously. But a baker also does more than just baking. It's not like, well, they shove the dough in the oven and that's their job done. They go home. Like, obviously, they're constantly, they're making recipes. They're doing things with dough and flour and everything. And I'm like, oh, obviously, we all know this. So why should we have a title reflect every single detail of the job?
All right. So here's the worst of both worlds. We briefly touched on it before. QA tester. Maybe someone other than Veerle now.
Yeah, please.
QA tester. That's trying to be all the things, isn't it? Quality assurance, quality, whatever. QA tester. It's really interesting what Veerle said as well. Is like if you don't, I think the sort of trying to give yourself a different title has come from the sort of the phrase of, oh, you're just a tester in so many organizations, or in old waterfall days, tester was the last, it was they're over there in their little booth or something like that. So there's been that kind of like almost arms race to try and give ourselves more importance by changing our titles to therefore try and get the teams to understand that we're not just the little testers. It's interesting. I think yeah, absolutely getting hung up on whether or not you're QA tester, quality assurance tester. I think really Veerle's point is we need to be respected and have respect for ourselves on what we call ourselves.
So here's something I've been playing around with, because recently they reorganized my department, and a lot of the new sort of sub-department names had QA in the department titles. And the reaction to that was so visceral that management within 2 days renamed every single one, because there was so much hate spewed from all the testers, test engineers, test automators. Universally, QA seems to be hated. Is anyone neutral on QA in this group?
Not especially, but I guess we've been talking about QA explicitly as quality assurance, and I guess that's what people primarily think QA stands for. Of course, it can mean other stuff, but I think I came from a place where QAs definitely were the bottom rung in development. That was perceived that way. It was certainly shown that way. We weren't allowed to talk to developers.
To me, it has a really strong gatekeeping connotation still.
Exactly.
And that's what I protest against.
And yeah, I think it's difficult because I understand where people come from when they talk about testers are only testing, but actually testing is wider than just that. But they're still thinking of testing as only an action, like an actual thing that you can see.
I think developers run into the same problem where if they're not producing code, like even in management, sometimes people will say like, why are you not productive? Why are you not working? And they're like, well, obviously I am working if I'm having like a refinement meeting or whatever, I'm doing design. So I think that in other professions, like they have the same problems, but they don't seem to sort of like try and bend the language around it.
Yeah, I think one thing that I personally don't like about QA is, why do we have to have a title that's abbreviated? Because I mean, it does include, it's like a bit of confusion on what it stands for. It could stand for great things, but just saying you're QA, it sounds like it's not even worth saying the whole, like what you do. It's like developers wouldn't like just call them D, because that wouldn't make any sense.
I've heard a variant that Rick mentioned here, Rick Marcelis in the chat, question asker. That's the one that does tend to pop up when people sort of try to re-own the title in some way. They feel they need to change it.
And in a way, I like it. I like it that you sort of have like the investigation aspect of the job. But then to all the people that say like, well, testers do more than testing, I'm like, well, we certainly do more than ask questions.
Yes, exactly.
That's the problem with any of these things, though, isn't it? Because I've also heard people even calling it questioning assumptions, which is lovely. And we do that. But it's not the only thing that we do. But then we can't have a job title that includes everything that we do.
You know what? I always feel that tester really does. But maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know why I would think that tester doesn't and QA engineer doesn't. But I always feel like tester is sort of like the baker of our profession titles. Like I feel it is the most complete, but I know that a lot of people disagree with me, and strongly as well.
Well, I think, I mean, traditionally, where testing used to be always at the end, as we said, as the gatekeeper function. I think that other people are stuck in the way of thinking that we shouldn't be involved early on, and perhaps that could be like a justification for calling ourselves something else, where you kind of understand that it's the whole quality part of it that we do, so you don't just involve us when things are developed or way too late.
I'm seeing something in the chat that I find really interesting. Heather R says, I have issue with it coming from a science background where QA means something very different. And I'm very curious, Heather, if you could comment what it means to you. Because I had a little Tinder adventure, like I think a year and a half ago or so, where I found someone on Tinder who said that their profession was QA, and I was like, oh, another tester. So I went chatting like, oh my God, I'm in QA as well, because I was like, clearly if they call it QA, I'm not going to say I'm a tester. I was like kind of like going along with it because, you know, you do want that date. And then it took us a while of having like a really weird conversation where in the end it turned out that he worked for a dairy factory and he had to take samples out of like the custard and the yogurt and test it for like certain microbes and everything. And it took us the longest time before we realized we had completely different professions and we had nothing to tell each other.
Yeah, I think that happens on job searches to this day. Like even when LinkedIn or some of those new job algorithms recommend functions, you're like, all of a sudden it's like test according to these NEN norms and the quality of the cars that we make. I'm like, that's not what I do at all.
We could go down the German route if we want to be more exact. You know how in German you put word after word after word. So we could be, you know, quality assurance analyst asking tester person type.
That would be an awesome solution, I think, and raises another interesting point. I think we should and could split the difference between what we call the profession and what we have as job titles, because I do feel job titles are signifiers that let people know what we're about. And I think the two get confused a lot, and that's where a lot of this mess is coming from. So I think it's significant if you put yourself out there as a senior test engineer versus, I don't know, an agile tester or a DevOps tester. I do think it signifies things. We should and could. Anyone want to weigh in on that?
I think it's true. I would say I identify as a tester. That's kind of my broad thing as a tester, and so I would put that down. But my job title is kind of more relevant to the context in which I work. I'm here, so within my company, my organization, it makes sense to have this title based on how things are, because that helps people where you work understand what you're doing. But I will still call myself a tester. I'm not going to introduce myself to everybody as a quality, but I was just going about what my job title is because it confuses me.
That's a great suggestion here from Ben. Exploratory and automation tester of all the things and QA engineer senior expert.
You had me all the way there, Ben, until you used expert at the end. Come on.
Yeah. Oh, what's wrong with expert? I want to be.
Don't get me started on SMEs and who gets to call themselves that.
See, I have a fundamental thing against people calling themselves expert in a field, because it's like then an expert to me, that word to me feels like sort of you reach the pinnacle. You're the expert, and as somebody who's a continual learner, I can never truly call myself an expert because there's so much more to learn, you know. So that's why I go, if somebody goes, yeah, I'm a testing expert, man, I'm like, oh my God, okay, so I'm going to stop the red rag. I'm going to sort of just let the red mist come down, breathe.
I think there's a lot of implications in that as well, but like where you are on the Dunning-Kruger scale, because like if you're calling yourself an expert, you're probably not as good as you think, rather than if you call yourself something slightly below that, you're probably actually a bit
What about, because there is some expertise, I think, inferred in the differences, for instance, between engineer and tester. So automation tester versus automation engineer. What are your feelings? Like, does it signify more expertise?
In the past, to me, it signified more of like somebody who was more considered themselves to be more technically minded, technically enabled. You know, an automation tester perhaps is someone who's more into writing the scripts, whereas the automation engineer is somebody who stands up the frameworks, who's able to do sort of some development work around integrating automation into the pipeline. Nowadays, I think it's it's so interchangeable because people know about titles and how a title is a bit of marketing for yourself. So everybody wants to try and get up that extra rung in the ladder. So rather than calling myself an automation tester, I call myself an automation engineer because that's my opinion of things. So I want to be better than that. So boom, and so that kind of has muddied it. I think is whether or not.
And then there's the lovely and completely wrong but often used automated tester. Which still makes me giggle every time a job description comes out where they're looking for a robot.
Yeah. And that's probably true. And to be fair, it's probably fairly true though. If they don't know to use something, automation engineer or automation tester, they probably are looking for somebody who is just basically a scripting robot and bashing the keys all day. So they'll get what they pay for.
Fair enough. It does seem to be a bit of a translation issue most of the time, though, where they don't know how to go from one language to English, but they put the job opening out in English. So we have to give them a little bit of slack, but it just makes me giggle every time.
Yeah.
So in the chat, there's a question about junior, media, and senior tester. What does everyone think about that? Because I have literally zero opinions.
Yeah, it's such a common thing at Capgemini to do, but it's more in terms of experience and years that you're in the job. So it doesn't have as much to do with knowledge or how capable you are of any particular skill.
Really?
Yeah, so you can be an agile tester and be junior, or you can be an agile tester and be senior. They're quite separate, which I don't know if it necessarily helps, but at least it is two distinct things. So you can still be a good agile tester while still.
But so when would you be assigned like media and senior? Does that like literally come after you've been in the profession for so many years, or do you actually need to demonstrate like a certain base level of knowledge and expertise?
Yeah, there's the skills matrix associated with junior, senior, and media, and the other side of things is just a path. So you could be a senior in test automation, or you could be a senior in agile testing. Both are entirely possible and have grading criteria, both hard and soft skills related, which I think at least is somewhat fair. It does get very fuzzy when you go beyond senior though, which is something that's another pet peeve of mine, where there's sort of like they're looking for kind of like a magic sauce to get you even further. Like once you go beyond senior, it's like, well, something has to distinguish you from all the other seniors, and what is that? And then they get to terms like thought leader, and it gets quite scary and even more fuzzy.
So is that what thought leaders are?
Yeah, just people for which we have no other name in terms of seniority. Right. Like we'll just like leader on there.
You know how at the Apple store, like they don't just have like shop assistants or salespeople, but they have like geniuses. Like everybody's name tag says, yeah, right. So like after senior, you probably have to become something like thought leader, genius, guru.
Yeah, but then is it genius in testing or test genius?
Oh God, I don't know.
Can't you just like t-shirt sizes add another senior on top, so it's like senior.
Like every 5 years, just add a senior.
That's it.
That would be confusing, wouldn't it?
All right.
Did you see Rick Marcellus there said a colleague of his with over 30 years experience deleted senior from his business card when a colleague of 3 years put senior on. I find that quite interesting, and in that it's like if somebody I mean, if they could justify the title senior after only 3 years, I'd say fair play.
If you've gone through our ranks fast, you can get to senior consultant in 3 years. That's a fast track. I guess it would have been something like that happened. I mean, we are all of us humble enough not to even call ourselves experts right now, which I think would be a massive difference to somebody that would put senior on their title after 3 years. So yeah, that might just be ego. I don't know. But taking it off is also a risk, isn't it? Because then, how do they tell that you are skilled and experienced? Yeah.
Actually,
it's a bit of a label, isn't it? Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I've got a specific question for Hanna, actually, because, you know, like Hanna has got the cool title. She's the quality catalyst, which I think is pretty awesome. And it's like the one quality related job title that I actually think is cool. Like most of the other ones, I'm like, no, that is lame, that is unspecific, that is just a buzzword. But like quality catalyst, I'm like, no, that's actually kind of cool. But I do wonder, we mentioned it earlier, like sometimes tester to some companies can sound like, or someone who's not technical, someone who doesn't really know how to do things, someone who can only just click and bash. So I'm kind of curious about what the quality culture is like, or what the culture in general is like at your company, Hanna, and like how they or you would come up with quality catalyst and what that means to everyone.
I think, well, mainly we had someone who was a bit creative with the titles, but I think it really describes it well on how working in the DevOps setting, where you drive the quality from the beginning and in the whole team, where you don't have time to do all the testing yourself. So it's a bit like a coaching role, but like the driving factor, just like the catalyst is in the car. I think I'm not a car expert, so if I said something wrong, then please correct me. But I mean, that's how it's viewed, and we're not really that many working with quality, but we do have some strong voices at our company as well, which I think helps.
So are there other, let's say, tester related people in the company? No,
it's just us
you.
quality catalysts. Yeah, we're three people.
Are there seniors as well? Do you have like, or can you become a senior quality catalyst as well?
No, we don't work with the seniors in our titles really. I think I'd be the most senior if we did, but I don't know. Saying senior, I just feel old. So I mean, I'm fine with it just being called quality catalyst.
I think that's great, especially since so my role in Prima is very similar in that I'm more my role is more around sort of enabling quality to happen, or the conversations to happen around quality. The actual tests are written by the developers. So but my title is senior quality engineer. I don't engineer anything. And so, you know, it's a title, but it's I think quality catalyst is so much more descriptive, because you are trying to to use your engine analogy, you are trying to sort of inject quality into the process to enable it to go better, cleaner, faster. And so, yeah, I totally love that title. I'd love to have that as a title.
Be the spark that lights the way.
And it's a really good conversation starter when you meet other people as well, because it's always going, if you say you're a quality catalyst, people are always going to like ask questions about it. So that's a really nice thing as well. So you spark the conversation and discuss what your thoughts are on quality.
It's a nice bridge to engineering, software development engineer in test. Let's talk about the SDET. This is an interesting one. I personally didn't run into this one until about 5 years ago. I didn't actually spot it anywhere. Is this a new term to you guys as well, or has it been around? Is it just the English versus Dutch language thing?
I've only been in testing for about 5 years, so I wouldn't know.
But you know what we mean by SDET, do you?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, but I've only started coming across it in like the past year or so. But maybe before that, I wasn't really paying attention.
SDET has been around for quite some time.
Yeah, I haven't really heard it much either. I'm the same as Veerle. I haven't really heard it until like recently.
So I encountered it first when I came back into software testing about 12 years ago, 14 years ago now, and Microsoft testers were quite often referred to as SDET, and that's when I started seeing SDET come through, because it was sort of like the Microsoft sort of automation engineers were considered to be highly skilled at the time, and so a lot of other companies started looking for that kind of profile. So yeah, I think certainly I've seen it more than 10 years ago come in.
I've seen it in a few places, but also I saw it quite often as where companies were trying to differentiate between testers and developers, where essentially they were saying you're a developer but you're writing tests, and I kind of found that a bit jarring.
Do tell why.
Well, I mean, because they were like, well, you know, developers can write tests explicitly, and that's their job. And you're like, well, they should be writing tests anyway. So why? And I did know of a developer who took an SDET role because he was like, this is great. This is like, I'm doing development, but it's easy. Everyone thinks I'm amazing because the testers can't write these sort of automated tests. He's like living in this happy little medium world. He was like, there's loads of SDET jobs that developers could do that are so much easier than developing, and they pay great. And I was.
No, to me, it does signify sort of a different type of tester. That would be like the embedded tester that is indeed also the quality catalyst, so to speak, but that is also working in test automation. So it does, in my mind, say something different than quality assurance analyst or tester. But yeah, I didn't know it was a term that was introduced by Microsoft. So it was copied, was it? And that's because Microsoft's products are also bug-free and working beautifully. Obviously, they do a good job.
They're certainly the highest paid testers I encountered when I was a consultant and trying to recruit people into the consultancy. And there was a guy in Microsoft, and I was like, so, you know, fancy coming working for us? And he's like, I would love to, but you can't ever afford me. And I was like, okay, how much are you on? And he was on £40,000 more than I was for the same equivalent job. And it was just like, yeah, I can't compete.
Yeah. Do you think job titles are linked to what you're paid? Like if you're paid a lot, does your job title have to be fancier?
Oh, really? I've had this conversation a few times with a few organizations. I don't think it needs to be. I think, you know, there's an assumption of like, to be senior, you have to manage people, and then once you manage people, then you get the bigger money. And I really dislike that sort of like assumption that if to go up in the ranks, you have to, you know, like say you're a manual tester, then you're an automated tester, then you're a technical tester, then you manage people, and then you manage teams, and then blah blah blah. And so I think there's always got to be a path for somebody who doesn't want to be a manager or doesn't need that sort of senior title to still earn the big bucks.
Actually, Shey, I think you said something really important there, because this is something that I recognize where people say like, I grew or I improved from a manual tester to an automation tester or something like that, which I always think is such a missed opportunity, because as a lot of people say, like for me personally, this is not true, because I find code one of the hardest things. I can't seem to learn it at all, but a lot of people do say like it is easier to teach a tester how to code than a coder how to test, because for testing you kind of have this, like, it's a mindset, it's a way of thinking, it's a way of approaching things. And so when people say like, oh yeah, I grew from a manual tester to an automated tester, I'm like, no, you just changed role completely. Yeah. Because you could just be like a manual tester, which I also hate as a word. But I'm thinking like you've as a tester, you've got this mindset, you're asking all the important questions, you're trying to keep the big picture in mind, you're trying to think about like the people behind the tech, which I think is really important for the tester to do, because usually what you see is that the people designing and building the software don't seem to do that, which is why I think testers can really pick up that sort of slack. And then I'm like, you could just do that for a lifetime and be super amazingly good at it, like be the senior expert, genius wizard of testing. And I think that would be more valuable growth than the growth from essentially one job to a different job.
Right. It's not very surprising that the witch of the test now suggests we start using wizards and witches as job titles.
You got in on me there, Sanne. I was about to say something similar. So I saw Patrick. I asked earlier in the chat there what was the craziest job title, and Patrick has said quality owner. Now, is that perhaps one of the most gatekeepery job titles you've ever heard ever?
It's so toxic.
It is, yeah.
All right, explain why do you find it toxic? Because I think I know, but you know, there's a lot of people listening.
Because of the gatekeeping quality that we've already said, it's like you own something, you're the boss of it, you can sit on top of something and say like, oh, we're not going to release because we've still got this and this bug, and you might have completely different interests than maybe the people wanting to release it. Like, it shouldn't be owned by one person, it should be owned by everybody involved. Apart from that, like, it works the other way around as well. If you are the owner and somehow something is messed up and gets released, like, that's on you, that's your head.
Yeah, there's an implicit level of you are also accountable for all quality fuck-ups. Yeah.
Which is terrible, and like, that shouldn't be, that is an amount of pressure that no individual should have to deal with, I think.
Yeah.
How about you, Shey? Why do you think it's crazy?
It's just no. Everybody should own quality, right? This is the whole thing. It's like so many talks, so many people in our industry talk and about making quality owned by the entire team. If everybody has an interest in the quality of the product that they're making, the quality will very likely be higher quality. And having someone who owns it, who has that title of owner of it, actually will sort of, in my opinion, make everybody else in the team sort of go, well, there's somebody who owns quality, so I don't need to care so much, and I can just bash the keys because they own it. I just need to do my job. And so there's that unconscious bias that will come into play within the team space, I feel.
Yeah, like the rest can just let it go. Hanna, did you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, well, I can't more than agree. I mean, it really does sound like one person is responsible for the whole quality aspect of everything. I mean, fair enough, one person could be responsible for driving the quality work and making sure, like, helping people. But I mean, it just sounds like a really poor scapegoat if something goes wrong. They're like, oh yeah, you're sacked because, yeah, the quality's not good.
All right, so instead of like the most sort of crazy title, what's the vaguest title you can have in testing? And I kind of want to look at Chris, since you've had some vague job titles. I've recently seen your CV. It's interesting.
I mean, what's interesting actually, I guess, is I mean, I've had quality practice and I've had quality strategy consultant and all these kind of crazy things. And I tell you, one thing that was quite interesting was that my parents seemed to think that the consultant was by far and away the best, and the only time they've ever told me that they were actually proud of me with my work, which was kind of interesting. But as far as the conversation it goes, it is difficult because you kind of, I don't know if I have any particular aspiration for what these titles are. I get irritated by these things, but I've also got these biases that come with them. I worked somewhere where technical test engineer was seen as lower down the rung than software test engineer. So like, depending on the context of where I've worked, different job titles have made more sense. But I feel like there's a real problem, not only with what levels we've got, but also how we refer to it as quality and what we're doing. And what I've always tried to do is all the stuff that we've been talking about, advocating for customers, advocating for the team, owning quality, and trying to actually do the stuff. And it doesn't seem to be the same anywhere I go. And it's really difficult to articulate that in your own context, but also where if you were looking for jobs in other places, how do you search for these things online to make sure that you've got the right job? How does it reflect your experience, whatever experience really means? Because is it really length of time? Is it exposure to stuff? And what you actually want to do? Because what I want to do, which in my head I think equals this title, doesn't necessarily reflect the same thing that another title has. And I worked in a globally distributed team where we were thrown together and we all had different titles, even though we were all doing the same job. We had people whose job title was test designer. We had people who were test engineers. We had people who weren't allowed to be test engineers because they didn't have engineering backgrounds. We had people who were QA analysts, and we had people who were QA developers. And It's really, really difficult. And then there's the pay grade issue that comes in as well, because different
It's
companies
annoying
have...
because it does need to signify something to the people outside of your company. Like within the little bubble that is Capgemini, people will get where I'm at in terms of seniority, but open up that can of worms to the outside. And it's like, right, well, what is it that you actually do? Good question, but the title doesn't tell you anything about what I do all day. Does
that mean you have to externally explain to people what your job title is or what you do differently? Like, would you post on your LinkedIn a job title different to what you actually have, so to better explain it?
Yeah, I gave up about a year ago. I just put tester.
I love that. Here, okay, so Sanne and I have recently had a conversation about a certain sort of, like, I tend to be unnecessarily suspicious sometimes. And Sanne tries to sort of like reassure me and says, like, don't assign to malice what you can assign to incompetence. So here is the suspicious me waking up, going like, what if in the big companies that Chris you were talking about, they have all of these different titles that all come with like different pay grades and everything, as a sort of like divide and conquer strategy. Like if nobody has the same
man
job,
trying to keep us down.
Yeah, like if everybody has a different job title that come with different perks and slightly different roles and slightly different salaries. Like what if that is a way to sort of like stop people from really talking about how much money they make, and if that is a fair representation for what you're actually doing?
Ooh, that's it's ringing a few truth bells, but again, I'm going to stick to my theory where I'm the optimistic one that's going to be like, this whole rainbow of job titles is more often incompetence than it is people trying to screw you out of fair pay. But
it probably is.
It is ringing. Yeah, it is ringing a few bells. I think you do have a point. There is something to it where it is sort of like, if you don't necessarily have the ambition to add engineer, senior, principal to your titles, I do think you're going to suffer for it. I think there is a signaling function to it that says something about pay grade. So yeah, unfortunately, the cynic in me is also coming out now.
Yeah, to come up with such a cool word, because I'm always going to be a tester.
Yeah, I mean, personally, with that Chris mentioned as well, we have engineers and people who are not allowed to call themselves engineer. I mean, that's such, for me, it's a personal matter as well. I used to work in a company that explicitly said they only hired engineers, except for me. And then when you address your employees as like, oh, us engineers, and I always felt so excluded. I'm like, well, sorry for not taking a year of math at university. I did other things that I actually use in my day-to-day work.
Yeah, to be honest, that is actually really mean and inconsiderate, I think.
Yeah, it is. I always felt like I was like a bit below everyone just because I did not have an
gatekeeping behavior, if I ever heard of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not a very nice way to get people to feel included if you're different in any way. Because being a woman in IT is not enough. Let's add not having the same degree as everyone else.
I'm going to steer us a little bit back to titles because we can go on a rant about that and we'd all be here for another hour. Last, but probably a favorite, what do we think and feel about manual testers? Silence.
Well, no, you know what I think about it.
I'm just getting my manual because I'm testing it right now.
It's not a good expression for what they do. I mean, I prefer exploratory testers, like saying that you do something.
Also, just linguistically, it has an issue, doesn't it? It's as bad as automated tester. It's as awful as the robot. I mean, manual tester would assume that it's somebody that's just manually, well, putting everything into a manual, I guess.
Yeah.
I also, one of the things that I don't like about both of those terms is that they seem to make everything very black and white. So a bit ago, I finally had my first little bits of experience with automation, but it wasn't the way I always thought. Like, if you want to do automated testing, you have to have like a complete 100% test suite that tests everything. And then you need to get like automatically generated reporting from it. And like that is all you do from that point. Whereas I just had to go through the same flow of like creating a new user account all the time. And so we built a little robot butler for me that took care of that, and it saved me like 2 minutes every time that I needed to do this. And that was like an eye-opener for me, and it shouldn't have been, but I was like, wow, this is wild. Like, automation can be used to assist you in testing. It doesn't have to like steal your job. So for me, when you call people manual testers or like automation engineers or something, it kind of presents that black and white worldview. Like, either you're the manual tester or you do automation, and there's no in between. But at this point, I'm like, I'm still more of an exploratory tester, but I have learned to use tools that automatically do something for me.
So when you say you would look for another job right now, having learned this and added this to your skill set, what would you put yourself out there as? Like, does this
still
not,
as a software tester?
It doesn't change, like, but what if then the roles you get did not allow you to grow this skill further? I mean, that would be an issue, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's certainly an issue. In fact, if anybody has the answer to this, please let me know, because I'm struggling with this very much.
So how do you call yourself what you are, but also show that you are either interested in exploratory or agile or automation? Like, do you add it? I think that would be the easiest, but then you get these really long wizardly titles, I guess.
I think that if you're trying to show that you know a little bit of scripting, because I'm similar to Veerle. I use the odd little script or little Chrome add-on or something like that to make my life easier, but I don't write automation scripts per se for large test suites, and I don't put automation anything in any of my job titles. But I like to think that the people who want to come and talk to me have read around my title and seen my job description and things like that beyond. Because to try and make a catch-all, as I go back to the sort of like, you'd have to do the German thing of tacking on all the words, making the big ass title.
Yeah. So what word would you use for a tester who specifically does not do any programming? It's directly from the chat here from Marit. What would your title be? Like you said, you don't mention it. So what title would you use?
Tester.
Tester.
Yes. Yeah, still just
we come back down. Yeah, we come back around to software tester. But also, instead of manual tester, I've in the past I've used manual exploratory tester to kind of hit home that I do exploratory testing, but people are looking for manual testers in their job description. So it's like you're getting a manual exploratory tester. So it's like trying to push the language into the conversation.
I still think tester covers so much, and I'm very comfortable with it, which is why I do have it on my LinkedIn, but I am worried about the signaling of that. It's like, because I am also experienced and I have a lot other skills to offer. So while I like it, I do still think we have to be careful to say, that's just it, that's the answer, let's just call ourselves software testers. I think that's too simplistic.
But if you're applying for a job, or if someone's looking at your LinkedIn, surely they don't just look at your title and then go away. Wouldn't you read a little bit on
so.
This will now start a rant on bots and scanners and keyword elimination and that kind of thing.
Yeah, but honestly, would you want to work for a company that don't even read through your page or don't want to get the essence of what you actually do? If you put time into describing what you've done in previous jobs, surely testers should cover it, because they'll be able to understand if you've done automation or if you've not coded at all from your experience.
And also significantly, despite all these different titles that we've been using, here's Sanne, Optimist Sanne coming out again. We as a community are finding each other despite all of these differences and job title distinctions. It's not like we are randomly searching around and trying to sort of find a community that doesn't suit us. It's enough of a group concept that we do end up in these same kind of sessions and communities, which I do think kind of helps.
That's true. But then there's also the case that I think a lot of us, it feels sometimes a bit like preaching to the choir. Like, I think a lot of us align in our mindset and how these things, probably the bits that annoy us and the bits that we like. And maybe half the problem is that even if we do agree, we still haven't really found a way to A, put that down as this is what we're going to be consistently, and then B, how we can own that and actually project that outside of our circles to say, this is what this is a good thing, this is why you need it, this is why you need that, this is what we do, this is what this means to us and why it is important in your context as well. Because I think we're quite good at sort of sitting here with ourselves and patting up, but not patting ourselves on the back, but almost sort of agreeing and saying, yes, this is this thing, and yes, I agree with you, this is this thing. And that's really important that we understand this. But how do we project that? How do we move into circles outside of our own communities to then be able to make this discussion less about, oh, nobody understands us, and more along the lines of, we understand who we are, and let's talk about this and what we stand for to other people. Become
advocates, quality advocates. No, not going there.
Testing advocates.
Trigger word.
Yeah. Bullshit lingo.
That's a really, really good point, Chris. And I actually do think like a lot of it comes down to that, like we could or should be more vocal about what it is that we actually do. I know, like for me, that I find it really hard to talk about testing, and I think a lot of people have that. It's like it's hard to explain all of the things that you do, which means that sometimes when people ask me about it, like non-testers but people from within the world of tech, that I get a little bit defensive almost about it, because I'm nervous that they will think that testing is not a real job. I find it hard to explain what I do, so you tend to get a little bit preventively offended, which is stupid. And so I do sometimes try to sort of like let that go and just be more vocal about what we do and why it is important. But I do agree with you, like we could be doing that more, and possibly we could be doing a better job.
Yeah. All right, I have a last one to discuss altogether, and it's we briefly touched it, quality engineering and testing, or the quality engineer. Like Shey, you briefly said we don't actually make anything, so how can we be engineers? Is it really that simple? Because it's used a lot.
I know, and it does. The question is it used too much? I think similar to the word assurance, and we don't assure quality, nor do we. Well, certainly me, engineer quality. So I mean, perhaps in a way I do. I sort of engineer the conversations around to quality, but that's where I come from with that. It's like an engineer to me is somebody who creates something. They make something tangible, or as tangible as you can have in software, and that's where the sort of engineer part, I sort of go, I'm not sure about that unless you're actually making something.
Yeah, you see, I think quality engineering is the answer to the allergic reaction we have to QA these days. So when then coming up with, okay, what do we call this department, since we cannot use QA because everybody that works there hates it? You know what we'll do? We'll call it quality engineering, because nobody really finds that insulting. So we'll just go with that. That seems to be how it's now being used to me. Like it's just an allergic reaction to QA, essentially.
Yeah.
It's not more useful.
I think you're right. But I mean, I don't know how it is in other countries, but certainly in Sweden, if you say you're an engineer, that's like, then you should have an engineering like diploma.
Yeah, it's a protected title. Yeah.
Yeah, and then it really does feel like you're ranking people who might not have an engineering background, but who still done computer sciences in other ways without the math parts. So I mean, for me, it's a big no-no. I would never apply for a job that included engineer in the title.
Because you don't have the certifications.
Yeah, partly, and I think it sounds exclusive as well. I mean, I don't really like excluding people based on education. That's like not the main part of when applying for a job.
Oh, fair enough. All right.
Last thing I saw in the chat that I think I lost the message by now, but I think it was Ben Down who asked, like, what do you think of agile tester?
Well, I'm part of the Agile Testers department at the moment. So it's like, ask me again in 3 months. I don't know. It feels forced, to be honest, as much as all the others. Like, Agile is of course a way of thinking. Possibly it influences the way you're working, but you are not an agile tester. Like it's the same thing as engineer. There just seems to be a little bit less gatekeeping to it, so it's a little friendlier as far as that goes, and it encompasses all the things people want to be. Like you can be an agile tester and still be specialized in putting code into systems, like test code into systems, or be focused on just doing the team coaching and the quality catalyst. It does kind of blanket a whole bunch of people and their skills, which honestly is what has happened now. The agile test department is one of the most diverse now that we've been reorganized. There's all kinds of people in there, from Scrum Masters to what I would call people specialized in test automation, because their focus is on agile ways of working and agile ways of working together. But yeah, ask me again in 3 months.
There was a conversation, wasn't there, on Twitter recently where they posted a latest translation of Agile Testing Condensed, I think it was, from Janet and Lisa, and someone had said, you know, is this just about testing? And they said, well, actually, no, it's not. It's broader than just about testing. And they talked about how the word testing in the title almost appears to sort of gatekeep access for people who aren't testers into engaging with both the books, but also they have the whole course in the Agile Testing Fellowship as well, don't they?
Yeah.
I think that discussion came out of the Agile Testing Days book club.
Hey, it might well have done. It is really interesting because some people just don't want to engage in testing because the name test is there, and you know it kind of the mind boggles sometimes.
All right, let's sum up a little bit. In general, what's the conclusion you're going to draw here from this discussion? Let's start with you, Hanna.
There's a lot of different names that we call ourselves, but it doesn't really matter. We do the same thing at the end of the day, but try to be inclusive in your titles, I think.
Good point. Shey?
I think having a title is a necessary evil to allow people to kind of try and understand what you do, but you are who you are. You choose your own title, either to use it for yourself internally and what you think of yourself, or if you're brave enough, put it on LinkedIn and just call yourself, you know, Quality Warlock or something like that, and ensure that you're having the conversation with people in the right way, and then you'll still get the jobs, you'll still have the seniority, and people will still respect you because you communicate with them. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I think I like the idea of tester being the common thread through all of these things. I do. I don't think there's ever going to be one consistent thread through this, but I just think the most important thing is that we talk about it, and we continue to talk about it, and we talk about what's important to us and what we're driven by, and how we advocate things and how we share these things. Like a lot of what any of our roles are to do is about communicating and sharing and getting ideas and continuing to learn and engage in these things. I think as long as we're doing that and it is something that is visible and we can share with people, tester is absolutely fine. Like I care more about being useful in the workplace and being recognized in my context for that than I do about what my title says about me. And I think if we continue to not only engage and communicate, but actually just do and practically sort of show this is what I mean and bring people on board with it to show that this is a team sport and you know, talk about those things, I think it's fine. Let's be testers and not gatekeep anymore.
Veerle, I'm going to end on you, so I'm just going to pop in here for a second. My thing is, it's a lot like, I think, Gmail labels. They're very useful. They can help you sort your inbox, and you're entirely free to put whatever color and wording in there that's useful to you. So they are signifiers, they are signalers, but other than that, yeah, just use them to clear up your inbox and move on and just do the work. Veerle.
I'll just make this about me as I make everything about me. What I'm taking away from today's session is that I am always going to be a tester at heart, but at some point I may have to sell my dignity if I do want that raise, if I do want that reputation as somebody who actually knows what they're doing. I might have to start calling myself other things, and I will never stop arguing about it, and I will never stop annoying people by telling them I think we should just all be code testers.
All right, thanks for that. All right, I'm going to be introducing our next month's topic in a second, but just before that, let me let you guys know how you can reach us. We are on Twitter at 9 out of 10 testers. We are LinkedIn, also 9 out of 10 testers. If you want to reach us personally, you can reach me at simply Sanne. Hanna?
You can reach me on LinkedIn. Just search for Hanna Schlander.
Shey?
I'm at Shey Mouse pretty much everywhere, on all the socials. Come and find me. Come and chat.
And Chris?
I'm at Christovskia on everything. I apologize for the terrible spelling.
And Veerle?
I'm Witch of the Test on Twitter. I'm Veerle Verhagen on LinkedIn, but that is difficult to spell, so otherwise just reach out on Twitter. And Sanne,
right.
just to clarify, all of the channels where we can be reached as 9 out of 10 testers, is that 9 and 10 spelled with letters or with numbers?
Good that you asked. I'll pop it in the chat here, but it is with numbers. So we'll pop it in the chat there.
Okay, good.
Next topic. Do you guys remember? Or should I open up the document? And because we had a bit of a rant about it already.
Is it?
All right. It's about personal development budgets and discussions with managers about them. So if you ask at a new job, do I have room for personal development? And they tell you, oh yeah, sure, there's a budget. And why that pisses us off.
Mate.
Looking forward to that one.
I'm
already getting itchy. I'm already getting itchy.
Yeah, we're going to have a good one with that one. All right. Thanks everyone for attending, and thank you for your time.
Thanks for all the great comments and questions in the chat as well.
Yeah, it's much appreciated. This makes it a conversation. So thanks everyone. All right, till next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 We're just still sitting.